A single candle burns in the dark, its flame trembling as though it remembers what the night once knew. The air feels heavy, scented with wax and centuries of silence. Somewhere in the stone corridors of an ancient monastery, a door creaks open, not a grand one of gold or iron, but a small wooden door that leads inward, into a place few have seen. This is where the story begins. Before clocks, before engines, before the hum of electricity, there was a slower world, one wrapped in superstition and silence. Knowledge did not roam freely then. It lived behind walls, guarded by men in robes who believed that to know too much was to tempt heaven itself. People today call that era the Dark Ages, as if a fog covered all of Europe. But darkness can be a choice, not an accident. Perhaps the light was dimmed deliberately, for in those centuries, to see clearly could be dangerous. The people were taught what they needed to survive, nothing more. Beyond the reach of sermons and bells lay a second world, a quieter one, stitched together with secrets. Those who glimpsed it risked everything. Imagine walking those corridors by candlelight. Every shadow holds a question. What truths were sealed inside these walls? Beneath the hymns and prayers, something else whispered a hunger to know, to measure, to understand. The same minds that copied Holy Scripture also glanced at forbidden diagrams, sketches of stars, strange herbs pressed between pages. Some called it heresy, others revelation. In a time when faith ruled reason, curiosity became rebellion. Modern eyes see certainty everywhere, science, data, proof. Yet certainty is its own kind of blindness. The medieval world breathed in uncertainty. It was woven into life. Lightning was divine anger, illness a punishment, comets an omen. But in hidden corners, a few began to wonder if the universe might obey patterns instead of prayers. They could not speak it aloud, so they whispered it into parchment and symbol. The world above sang of salvation. The world below searched for understanding. Perhaps the greatest illusion is that the past was ignorant. What if it was only concealed? The monks, the scholars, the wanderers, they did not lose knowledge. They locked it away. And somewhere in that silence, the keys were hidden too. As the candle gutters, the flame folds into darkness. A faint sound breaks the quiet, the turning of parchment. Words scrape softly against time itself. The monastery breathes, patient and secretive, as though aware that one day the outside world will come searching. In that moment, the Dark Ages no longer feel distant. They feel deliberate. The listener senses that truth is not found in the light, but in the dim places we forgot to look. And so, we follow that turning page deeper into the past, toward those who shaped memory itself, the quiet hands that decided what would be remembered and what would be erased. The candle fades, only the sound of quills remains. The scene widens to the heart of the monastery, the scriptorium. Rows of monks sit bent over desks, their spines curved like question marks. Sunlight filters through narrow windows, striking motes of dust that dance above the parchment. Every breath they take is measured, every stroke of the quill deliberate. They are copying the world one word at a time. To the casual eye, they appear holy, disciplined, detached from temptation. Yet in their ink lies power. A single omission, a subtle rewording, a burned margin, each can reshape history. The monastery was not merely a house of prayer, it was a vault. In a time without printing presses, knowledge existed only in fragile manuscripts. To copy was to choose. What they preserved survived. What they ignored disappeared. In some corners of Europe, entire libraries were dedicated to recording the works of Aristotle and Galen. In others, those same texts were declared dangerous, sealed, or burned. One monastery might keep a Greek treatise on medicine, another would scrape the parchment clean to reuse it for psalms. Even the ink hid decisions. Black for scripture, red for warnings, gold for the words of kings, every colour a hierarchy of importance. Imagine a monk pausing, quill trembling above the page, deciding whether a diagram of planets should remain. He glances toward the door. Outside, a superior passes, whispering about purity and obedience. The monk hesitates, then draws his sleeve across the diagram, smearing it into nothing. In that moment, an idea vanishes from human memory. But not all were obedient. Hidden in the margins of certain manuscripts are tiny sketches, faces, spirals, coded letters, small acts of defiance by those who could not bear to erase truth entirely. A secret generation of scribes left breadcrumbs, trusting that someday someone would notice. Many of the strangest discoveries in modern archives began as accidents, invisible inks revealed by candle heat, faint outlines beneath overwritten hymns. What once was destroyed now flickers back to life under the lenses of machines. The monasteries were sanctuaries and prisons both. Within them lay fragments of ancient medicine from Alexandria, astronomical tables from Baghdad, formulas from lost alchemists. Yet each was cloaked in religious commentary, buried under layers of obedience. The guardians of faith preserved what they feared to understand. There are records of certain codices chained to altars, as if the knowledge itself might escape. Others were hidden in crypts beneath cathedrals, sealed in lead boxes to protect against corruption or discovery. When armies plundered monasteries, they sought gold, never realizing the true treasure was ink. Centuries later, when archaeologists uncovered half-burned scrolls from monastic ruins, they found recipes for metal alloys, instructions for distillation, and symbols that matched those of early chemistry. It seemed impossible. How could monks sworn to silence harbor the seeds of modern science? Yet they did. Quietly, fearfully, and with a reverence that bordered on guilt. As the quills continue to scratch, the air fills with an almost mechanical rhythm. Ink, breath, prayer, ink again. Through their work, memory becomes malleable. The past is rewritten, polished, disguised. The illusion of darkness remains intact, while beneath it, the embers of discovery glow unseen. Somewhere, a bell tolls. The monks rise, leaving their pages to dry. On one desk, a faint symbol catches the light, a circle enclosing a cross, too intricate for decoration. No one notices. Yet it will matter, for in that symbol lies a clue, a trace of those who refuse to forget. The ink dries. The wind moves through the corridor, rustling loose pages like wings. Each sheet carries a fragment of truth, waiting centuries to be read again. And as those pages settle, another question stirs. Who were the men and women brave enough to seek what others concealed? The candle burns again, though this time its flame dances on metal rather than stone. The scene shifts to a dim cellar beneath a city, an alchemist's workshop. Shelves crowd the walls, stacked with bottles of cloudy glass. The air smells of smoke, salt, and something faintly sweet. A man in a rough robe studies a manuscript rescued from a monastery fire. He runs his finger along a geometric diagram, whispering the names of planets like a prayer. He is one of the seekers. They were a quiet brotherhood, without uniform or country, drawn from scholars, healers, wanderers. Some wore the cross, others denied it. All shared one conviction, that truth did not belong to the powerful. To them, the universe was not chaos, but a pattern, one that could be traced if you dared to look beyond doctrine. They studied metals that changed color under heat, plants that healed in silence, numbers that formed perfect shapes. Each discovery felt like trespassing on divine territory. Stories tell of a monk who believed geometry itself was the language of creation. He filled margins of his texts with circles intersecting at divine ratios, convinced they mirrored the structure of the heavens. When the symbols were discovered, he vanished from his abbey. Some said he was exiled, others whispered he ascended through his equations. The only proof of his existence remains in those drawings, symbols too complex for their time, too precise to be dismissed as art. Such figures blurred the line between saint and heretic. They lived in constant tension. To reveal was to risk, to conceal was to betray knowledge itself. Many were condemned, yet their work survived in fragments. Later generations would find their notes bound within harmless psalters, or hidden beneath paint in illuminated letters. What appears as beauty often hides rebellion. Imagine that monk's last night. Candles dwindling, ink nearly gone, he bends over his page one final time. Outside, torches approach the sound of boots on stone. He draws one last symbol, a spiral enclosing a star, then presses the page into a hollow beneath the desk. When they break the door, the desk seems ordinary. He is taken. The book remains. Centuries pass. The monastery becomes ruins, then a museum. Tourists walk over the very floor where that secret still sleeps. Somewhere in its fibers lies a truth no one has yet read. Perhaps it explains a pattern in the stars, or a formula lost to time, or perhaps it simply reminds us that knowledge never dies, it only waits for someone to listen. The seeker's legacy endures not in treasure or triumph, but in quiet defiance. Every age buries its heretics, then builds monuments to their ideas. What was once forbidden becomes familiar, until a new boundary appears and the cycle begins again. Outside the cellar, dawn breaks. Light touches the walls, but the room feels darker than before, as though the shadows themselves guard the memory of what transpired. Somewhere, a symbol glows faintly in the dust, a circle and a star, echoing that lost monk's final gesture. It reminds us that some secrets were meant not to disappear, but to guide. The candle flickers once, twice, and dies. The smoke rises like a question mark against the morning air. The scene dissolves, carrying us away from the hidden cellars of the past toward the glow of strange fires. The laboratories where matter itself was questioned, and where the line between science and magic would blur beyond recognition. In the heart of a medieval night, beneath roofs of smoke and secrecy, the alchemist's chamber glows. Candles tremble beside glass vessels, their necks long and thin like the throats of trapped spirits. Metal instruments glimmer in the flickering light, half tools, half relics. Somewhere, water hisses against fire. The air hums with a faint metallic scent, and above it all, silence, patient and deliberate. He stands alone, a figure wrapped in shadows, watching liquid swirl from clear to crimson, from gold to black. For him, this is not sorcery, it is prayer made visible. The world beyond his walls may call him mad, but within these narrow stone confines he feels closer to the divine than any church could offer. He is not chasing gold, not truly. He seeks something purer, transformation itself. Alchemists were the dreamers of matter. To them, every metal, every mineral was alive, journeying through invisible stages of spiritual growth. Lead was not failure, it was youth, unrefined potential. Gold was the end of the pilgrimage, a symbol of enlightenment. In that gleaming metal they saw perfection matter purified, soul redeemed. Turning lead into gold was never about greed. It was a metaphor for the human condition. Their experiments bridged the visible and the invisible. They studied how fire changed the nature of stone, how water softened or hardened, how air could carry unseen spirits. Each experiment whispered that nature hid a secret intelligence, something that guided the world from within. To understand it was to glimpse the handwriting of creation itself. Outside these hidden laboratories, the world lived in absolutes, faith and heresy, heaven and hell. But in the alchemist's room, opposites melted into each other. Spirit became substance, substance spirit. He would mix mercury, silver, and salt, watching their union give birth to colours never seen by ordinary eyes. The transformation was slow, but so was faith. Both required patience, failure, and the courage to continue. Sometimes he wrote his results in riddles. The red lion devours the green dragon. Outsiders saw madness, insiders saw method. In those words, lion meant fire, dragon meant earth. Symbols guarded his thoughts from those who would burn him for curiosity. To protect truth, he disguised it as myth. Imagine him in the quiet hours before dawn. The world outside sleeps under superstition, while he holds a crucible glowing with possibilities. He believes that what is true in nature must also be true in the soul. If metal can be purified by flame, perhaps man can be refined by wisdom. If lead may become gold, perhaps ignorance may become understanding. When the mixture bubbles over, he doesn't flinch. He watches as smoke curls upward like scripture in motion. In that rising vapor, he sees more than chemistry, he sees creation replaying itself. He believes the divine lives in transformation. That belief will carry his art into the centuries ahead, reshaping medicine, chemistry, and philosophy, long after his name fades from parchment. The alchemist's fire burns softly now, its light touching the pages of his notes. Equations, sketches, and prayers lie together, inseparable. What he discovered in secret would one day ignite revolutions of thought. Yet tonight, he works quietly, whispering to himself that perfection is not found in what glitters, but in what endures. The flame flares suddenly, brighter, as though responding. The air shivers with something almost alive. In that moment he feels close to revelation, closer than he has ever been. The crucible hums. The fire roars. Perhaps he is no longer studying matter at all, but the boundary between worlds. And as the chamber fills with smoke, one truth becomes clear. He was never trying to make gold. He was trying to touch the eternal. The alchemists were storytellers as much as experimenters. Every line they wrote carried two meanings, one for the world of reason and another for those who read between the lines. They had to write that way. To speak too plainly was to die too quickly. The Inquisition listened for dangerous words. They could not hear metaphors. So, they built a language of symbols. A serpent eating its tail, called the Ouroboros, spoke of life consuming itself to be reborn. The philosopher's egg represented creation sealed inside matter, awaiting the right spark to awaken it. The black crow meant decay, the first step toward renewal. None of these were decorations. They were formulas written in disguise, stories encoded with chemistry, astronomy, and faith. What seems like myth was sometimes medicine. Hidden among tales of dragons and elixirs were recipes for distilling alcohol, refining salts, and creating antiseptics. To preserve the soul, they learned to preserve the body. In their pursuit of immortality, they stumbled upon healing. Modern chemistry, in its most sterile form, still carries their fingerprints: sublimation, precipitation, dissolution, all words born from their secret laboratories. But these discoveries could not be claimed openly. The Church believed creation belonged only to God. To imitate it was arrogance, to question it, rebellion. So the alchemists hid their science inside parable. A story of transmutation became an allegory for resurrection. A search for the philosopher's stone was a meditation on divine order. By pretending to chase miracles, they protected the mechanics of nature. Yet even their coded writings tremble with wonder. They sensed a truth. Modern eyes often forget that the physical and the spiritual are not separate realms but reflections. When they spoke of purifying metals, they also spoke of purifying thought. Every retort, every flame, was an echo of the human journey from ignorance into light. The alchemist symbols still haunt art, literature, and architecture. The Ouroboros winds around cathedrals and cathedral minds alike, a silent reminder that destruction and creation are one act. The egg appears in old paintings, balanced between heaven and earth, waiting to crack open into understanding. Even the cross itself hides geometry once sacred to their craft, the union of vertical and horizontal, heaven-touching matter. Imagine reading those texts centuries later, unaware of their code. You might think them nonsense fantasy without function. But tilt the page toward the light, and hidden inks appear. Circles align, ratios emerge, and suddenly the language of myth transforms into mathematics. It's tempting to ask what else they knew. Were they close to a discovery we've forgotten? Some believed they held the secret of the universal medicine, a cure not just for disease, but for decay itself. They said that in the perfect balance of elements, the body would cease to age. Perhaps it was metaphor, perhaps not. The line between healing and immortality is as thin as the smoke above their crucibles. The narrator's voice softens, almost reverent. The alchemists may have failed to conquer death, but they succeeded in conquering oblivion. Their knowledge survived because they wrapped it in dreams. And yet, as we turn their fragile pages, another question emerges. Where did they learn such patterns? Who first taught humanity that the universe was something to be solved? Knowledge, like fire, travels. It leaps across borders, through languages, through time. The alchemists of medieval Europe were not creators of mystery, they were inheritors. The spark that lit their crucibles had been carried for centuries, smuggled through deserts, preserved in ink and memory. Long before monasteries guarded their libraries, the ancient city of Alexandria burned with thought. In its vast library, scrolls from Greece, Egypt, Persia, and India met and mingled. There, priests wrote beside mathematicians, astronomers beside poets. The language of transformation was born not from one culture, but from their union. When the library fell to flame, its knowledge did not die. It scattered, carried by travelers, merchants, and refugees who remembered more than they were allowed to say. As empires rose and fell, the wisdom of the ancients hid inside trade routes. Along the Silk Road, where silk and spices crossed continents, manuscripts moved to sealed in boxes, written in symbols few could read. They spoke of mercury as spirit, sulfur as soul, and salt as body. To the untrained eye, these were harmless metaphors. To those who knew, they were formulas for understanding the essence of existence. In the markets of Damascus and Baghdad, scholars translated Greek into Arabic, blending it with Egyptian and Babylonian thought. They refined mathematics, recorded the stars, and explored medicine beyond superstition. Their works on distillation, metallurgy, and pharmacology would later inspire the European alchemists, who claimed discovery but inherited devotion. Without the East, the Western flame would never have been kindled. Imagine a coded letter travelling from a scholar in Cairo to a monastery in Spain, disguised as poetry, but describing the process of crystallization. A merchant delivers it without knowing its worth. A monk reads it by candlelight, realizing that the verse about the sleeping dragon beneath glass refers to mercury reacting with salt. A single page bridges civilizations. Knowledge moved in whispers because truth was fragile. Each translation risked distortion, but also evolution. A Greek formula might gain a Persian metaphor, which a Latin scribe would translate into prayer. In this way, science became myth, and myth became science again. Every culture added a layer of concealment and preservation. It is easy to believe knowledge simply progresses, but perhaps it circulates, like the Ouroboros itself consuming its tail, reborn in each age. The alchemists of Europe did not rediscover the ancient world. They remembered it. Beneath every Latin word lay an Arabic one, beneath that a Greek, and beneath that a memory from the sands of Egypt. And what of Babylon, where priests watched the heavens for messages from gods? Their celestial tables still survive mathematical, not mystical. From their patterns came astrology, but also astronomy. To them, predicting the sky was not fortune-telling. It was decoding divine rhythm. That rhythm guided the builders of pyramids, temples, and later, cathedrals. Each generation thought it owned knowledge, yet each only borrowed it. What we call progress may be recollection. Perhaps all human discovery is remembering something we once knew. As the narration slows, the sound of turning parchment returns. A map unfolds, its lines glowing faintly under candlelight. Roads converge, then fade into one another, until they form not geography but geometry, a symbol rather than a path. The ancient trade routes dissolve into circles and triangles, into proportions familiar yet forgotten. The fire in the alchemist's chamber burns low now, reflecting that same geometry in its dancing light. Matter, motion, meaning woven together through centuries. What began as dust and ink becomes a whisper of unity, one truth passing through many hands, each shaping it, each hiding it again. And as the last spark fades, the narrator breathes. The journey of knowledge is not linear, it spirals. Every secret lost in one age returns in another, disguised, transformed, waiting to be found once more. Beneath grey northern skies, stone giants rise. Their spires stretch upward, as if reaching for a truth they were forbidden to name. The cathedrals of medieval Europe do not stand by accident. Every column, every arch, every window was placed with a precision that seems almost impossible for an age without machines. Yet somehow, those builders captured light itself and taught it to sing. Walk into one of these cathedrals, and the air changes. Sound softens, time slows. Above you, vaults of stone soar like frozen waves. Columns divide the space with mathematical rhythm. Each angle, each curve, echoing a secret order. To the ordinary worshipper, it was divine beauty. To those who understood geometry, it was revelation written in stone. Sacred geometry was not art, it was theology encoded in measure. Circles represented heaven, squares the earth. The triangle mirrored the divine trinity and the proportions of the human body. Builders didn't just design, they invoked. Their blueprints were prayers expressed through compass and ruler. Each cathedral became a model of the cosmos, a stone diagram showing how creation was held together. Light, too, was part of the equation. The great rose windows, intricate as spiderwebs, were aligned with the path of the Sunday morning. Light passed through coloured glass not by chance, but by design. Every hue was chosen for meaning. Blue for eternity, red for sacrifice. gold for the divine spark. As sunlight entered, it was transformed into theology, pure radiance divided into truth. In the 12th and 13th centuries, builders mastered something modern. Eyes rarely notice: how to make stone appear weightless. Flying buttresses carried the strain outward, allowing walls to dissolve into glass and colour. Inside, light poured in from every direction, surrounding worshippers in a glow that blurred the boundary between material and spiritual. To stand there was to feel both small and infinite. Yet behind the devotion lay secrecy. The same men who carved saints and angels into portals also etched symbols that few priests could read. Spirals, hexagons, and repeating ratios hinted at knowledge older than Christianity itself, echoes of Egyptian temples, Greek harmonics, and Arabic mathematics. The cathedrals, for all their holiness, carried the fingerprints of forgotten civilizations. Scholars have measured their proportions and found patterns that defy coincidence, ratios identical to those found in musical harmony and planetary motion. It is as if these cathedrals were tuned like instruments, resonating with the same mathematics that governs the stars. They weren't just churches. They were coded machines of light, part temple, part equation, part prayer. And perhaps that was the point. In a world where speaking certain truths meant death, the builders let their stones whisper them instead. They created spaces that reminded humanity of a deeper order, one that neither king nor church could own. To enter such a place was to walk inside a thought so vast that centuries later, it still hums beneath the surface of the stones. As sunlight slides through the rose window, it scatters across the floor in perfect geometry. The colour fades, then gathers again, shifting with the hours like the pulse of a living thing. The light passes through the glass, through centuries, until it lands upon the hands of the men who built it. Their faces are lost to time, but their message endures. Truth can be hidden in beauty and protected by silence. And so, as that last beam of light fades into shadow, the story follows it to those silent hands, the secret brotherhoods who carried geometry like a sacred flame. They called themselves craftsmen, but their work was closer to devotion. The medieval stonemasons, the hidden architects behind Europe's cathedrals, were bound not only by skill but by oath. They travelled from city to city, building the impossible, leaving behind walls that whispered of something more than worship. They knew things others did not. They spoke in symbols, not words. A square and compass, a five-pointed star, the number 3 repeated in design, each signalled belonging to an ancient lineage of builders. To outsiders, they were mere labourers. To those initiated, they were keepers of proportion, inheritors of geometry that stretched back to Egypt and beyond. Their knowledge was dangerous. Mathematics in that age was more than numbers, it was power. To understand geometry was to understand creation, to imitate the divine. So they hid what they knew in plain sight, carving meaning into capitals, arranging stones according to cosmic ratios. The very act of building became a ritual. Legends say the masons carried with them a book of measures, a compendium of sacred ratios, the golden mean, the harmonic fifth, the perfect triangle. Some swore it descended from Solomon's temple. Others believed it was drawn from Pythagoras, the philosopher who claimed that the universe itself was built on harmony. Whatever its origin, the masons guarded it fiercely. Within their lodges, apprentices were taught not just how to cut stone, but how to see. Geometry was their scripture, balance their prayer. They believed that every cathedral echoed the structure of the cosmos, that by replicating that order, they invited divine presence into human space. The Masons' creed was simple yet profound. To build was to remember the original design of the universe. The church blessed their work but did not control it. For while bishops commissioned cathedrals, they could not interpret their symbols. The Masons' carvings were filled with riddles, faces half human, half beast, knots that tied upon themselves endlessly, stars that aligned to constellations unseen by the common eye. These were not decorations. They were encrypted teachings, reminders that faith and reason once walked side by side. Over centuries, their brotherhood evolved. Whispers grew of hidden councils, secret initiations, rituals held beneath unfinished spires. The Masons began to call themselves free, bound by no master but truth. Some say they carried fragments of forbidden texts rescued from monastic fires, manuscripts on light, proportion, and energy too heretical for their time. Their cathedrals stand as their legacy, places where stone breathes and light obeys. Inside, one can almost sense their intention to harmonize the earthly with the eternal. Perhaps that is why even now, centuries later, these spaces still calm the mind. The mathematics they embodied resonates with the human heartbeat. We may not know the formulas, but we feel them. They built cathedrals, but what they were really building was eternity. Every arch they raised mirrored the curve of the heavens, every column a bridge between body and soul. Even the spiral staircases echoed the motion of galaxies. The masons knew, to last forever, a building must resemble the cosmos itself. Their order faded with time, their secrets diluted into legend. Yet their mark survives in the tools still used by builders today, and in symbols that later generations would call Masonic. Behind every compass, every square, every keystone, lies a memory of men who believed that truth could be shaped by hand. And just as their stones were carved with precision, so too was the human body. The same geometry that lifted cathedrals began to find reflection in something far more forbidden: the design of flesh. In the candlelit hush of a monastery cellar, a table waits. Upon it lies a human form, covered by cloth. Around it, the air trembles with unease. Dissection was forbidden, an act both sacred and profane. Yet here, in the hidden corners of faith, the geometry of the soul met the geometry of the body. For centuries, the Church taught that the body was holy, not to be opened by human hands. But knowledge has a way of seeping through cracks. Physicians, scholars, and monks with curious minds gathered in secrecy to study what could not be spoken aloud. They wanted to understand creation not in prayer, but in pattern. When the cloth was lifted, silence followed. Beneath the skin lay a universe. The same proportions that governed cathedrals appeared in bones and muscles. The curve of a rib echoed the arch of a nave. The spiral of an ear mirrored the wall of galaxies. The body, it seemed, was a cathedral of its own, built with the same laws of harmony that shaped the stars. Ancient medical manuscripts, smuggled from the Arab world, guided these hidden dissections. Within them were diagrams of organs drawn with reverence, not defiance. Those physicians did not seek to challenge the divine, they sought to understand its craftsmanship. Yet to the authorities, curiosity was rebellion. Many who studied the body vanished, their names erased. Still, the parallels between flesh and architecture persisted. Builders had long spoken of living stones, of structures that seemed to breathe. Now anatomists found the reverse: a body structured like a building, bones forming columns, the spine a central pillar. To them, creation was not random, it was ordered, symmetrical, divine. This realization was dangerous. It blurred the line between God and geometry, between faith and knowledge. But to the seekers, it was proof of unity, that the same mind designed cathedral and creature alike. In that symmetry, they felt something eternal stirring. As time passed, sketches of anatomy became bolder. Artists like Leonardo da Vinci, heirs of both mason and monk, mapped the human form with sacred precision. His drawings of hearts, skulls, and hands were not just scientific, they were devotional. Each curve whispered that the human body was a reflection of the cosmos, the hidden blueprint of creation itself. They said the body was sacred, so why did they slice it open? Perhaps to prove that the sacred could be measured, that spirit and structure were one. Those forbidden anatomists carried forward the mason's torch, tracing geometry not in stone but in flesh. And as candlelight fades across the cellar table, the story turns inward from bones and organs to the mind itself. What secret geometries dwell within thought? What hidden patterns guide consciousness, belief, and fear? The next chapter descends there into the labyrinth of the human spirit, where the most forbidden knowledge of all still waits in silence. The stone cathedrals fade behind us, their arches dissolving into mist. What remains is silence, thick, resonant, alive. Within that silence begins another kind of architecture, one not built from stone but from thought itself. The medieval mind believed consciousness was not contained within the skull, but extended into the cosmos. To think was to echo creation, to feel was to touch the divine. In candlelit monasteries, long before the vocabulary of psychology existed, monks sought to chart the hidden terrain of the soul. They spoke of illumination, dark nights, and ecstasies that fractured reality. To them, the mind was not a machine, it was a window, and if one knew how to look, one could see eternity looking back. Each order practiced its own form of exploration. Some relied on silence so complete it bordered on hallucination. Others used the rhythm of chants, repeated until the words dissolved into pure vibration. Fasting starved the senses into surrender. Sacred herbs, bitter, fragrant, strange, opened doors that prayer alone could not. And when visions came, they were written down in trembling ink, equal parts terror and revelation. In the 12th century, a woman named Hildegard von Bingen began to see colours that had no names. Light poured through her mind like fire through glass, shaping images of worlds unseen. She described voices not as sound, but as harmony, mathematics translated into vision. Her writings would later be read as mysticism, but beneath their beauty lies something else, a study of perception itself. Perhaps she was not mad, nor divine, but the first to document the boundaries of human awareness. For centuries, such experiences were the only way to study the mind. There were no instruments, no laboratories, only bodies and faith. Yet the monks observed patterns. They noticed how breath changed thought, how repetition altered time, how solitude could make the invisible tangible. What they discovered through devotion, we now explore through science. But their method was more dangerous. They sought not control, but surrender. To the modern world, consciousness is chemistry, neurons, and current. To the medieval thinker, it was resonance, a vibration that could align or fall out of tune with the divine. Madness was not a malfunction, but a misalignment, a discord between human and heavenly rhythm. Healing, then, required harmony, sound, light, prayer, and balance. Imagine the monastery at night. Rows of figures kneel, their breaths merging into one. The air hums with a frequency that seems to shape the darkness itself. This was more than worship. It was a collective experiment in altered awareness. And sometimes it worked. Records speak of visions shared among groups, of lights appearing above altars, of voices heard by many at once. Was it hysteria, suggestion, or proof that the mind can reach beyond itself when many minds beat together? Their goal was never enlightenment in the modern sense. They sought communion, a state where thought dissolved into order so vast that individual identity meant nothing. To lose oneself was to find truth. In that surrender, they believed, the universe whispered back. The geometry of cathedrals mirrored this inner design. Arches became brainwaves, stained glass became dream. The world outside and the world within were reflections of one another. To study one was to know both. The chanting fades, the silence stretches. And from that stillness, a new realization flickers. The same methods that opened the mind to the divine could also shape it, mold it, even control it. The narrator's voice lowers, almost conspiratorial. Some minds did not seek God's voice. They sought to control it. The human mind is fragile when it hungers for meaning. In the Middle Ages, that hunger became a currency. The church, the crown, the merchant, each learned that belief was the most obedient servant. In the great plazas, sermons echoed like spells. Words chosen carefully, repeated endlessly, shaped not only faith but thought. A sinner could be reborn, a heretic erased, an empire justified, all through the rhythm of language. What began as prayer became programming. Fear was the instrument. Eternal damnation, purgatory, the flames that never ended, all described in exquisite detail to ensure obedience. People learned to police their own thoughts, terrified of an unseen audience. Yet behind that fear was strategy. The same geometry that ordered cathedrals ordered belief. The repetition of ritual, the symmetry of confession, the pattern of guilt and redemption, all designed to create predictability. Miracles, too, were crafted with precision. Blood that flowed from statues, relics that glowed, the scent of roses appearing from nowhere. Many were staged, some perhaps exaggerated, but all served the same purpose: to remind the faithful that the boundary between heaven and earth could be crossed by those in power. To doubt was to risk exile, or worse, silence. The human mind craves stories that explain suffering. The authorities provided them generously. Every storm, every illness, every failed harvest could be traced to sin or salvation. Thus, control required no sword, no army, only belief. Those who mastered the art of suggestion ruled without lifting a blade. Yet within this manipulation lay brilliance. The architects of faith understood psychology centuries before the word existed. They knew how images burn deeper than logic. They built pageantry that overwhelmed the senses: incense, organ music, candlelight reflecting from gold. Worship became theatre, awe replaced questioning, and the audience never left. But belief can never be perfectly contained. Within the same walls where fear was cultivated, doubt took root. Some priests began to suspect that what they performed was illusion, not miracle. Some whispered that God's power might reside not above, but within. Their hesitation was noted. Many disappeared. The church's dominance was not total, yet its genius lay in subtlety. It didn't need to ban every book or burn every thinker. It needed only to shape the framework of reality itself to define what questions could be asked. Beyond that boundary lay heresy. And once a word like that takes hold, it polices the mind more efficiently than any jailer. Still, even the most perfect illusion cracks. People began to wonder how a loving God required terror to be worshipped. They saw contradictions, glimpses of the machinery beneath the miracle. And so, forbidden knowledge began to stir again, not through metal or medicine, but through reflection. The greatest rebellion was to think for oneself. As the centuries turned, belief remained a currency, but its mint began to shift from pulpit to palace, from prayer to politics. The art of control would evolve, its methods refined. But in the medieval world, its foundations were already perfect. The narrator's tone deepens. The mind controlled belief, but what controlled the mind itself? Many looked upward, to the night sky, where destiny was said to be written in light. Above the silent cities, the stars burned with impossible clarity. In that darkness, the medieval sky was not empty, it was alive. Each point of light was a symbol, a word in the language of God. The universe was a book, and those who could read it held power over fate. Astrology and astronomy were once the same pursuit. One spiritual, one scientific, both forbidden to question. The heavens were thought to mirror the human soul. Every birth aligned with a constellation. Every death echoed a celestial pattern. To know the stars was to know destiny. Scholars in Toledo mapped their movements, tracing orbits with trembling quills. They discovered that the heavens were not fixed, as once believed, but in motion, orderly, predictable, alive with mathematics. Yet such revelation was perilous. If the stars moved according to natural law, then perhaps they were not controlled by divine will. And if the heavens obeyed reason, what did that say about the earth? To read the stars was to read God's private thoughts. And so, astronomers became heretics. Some disguised their observations as devotion. Others fled into silence. Copernicus would later rewrite the heavens themselves, placing the sun, not the earth, at the center. But long before him, Arabic and Jewish scholars whispered of similar truths, their manuscripts traveling quietly across borders, disguised as treatises on navigation. The Church tolerated astronomy so long as it confirmed Scripture. The moment it did not, the sky itself became dangerous. Yet even those who condemned the stargazers still looked upward. For the human mind cannot help but seek reflection. The stars reminded them that everything mind, matter, and mystery might be part of the same vast pattern. In this belief lay both comfort and fear. If the stars guided human life, then free will was illusion. But if they were simply mirrors, perhaps destiny could be rewritten. And that thought, quiet, intoxicating, was the seed of revolution. Night after night, observers charted the heavens, risking accusation for curiosity. They recorded eclipses, measured shadows, and in those silent calculations the universe began to lose its divine mask. The forbidden truth emerged slowly. The cosmos did not revolve around humanity. Humanity revolved within it. That realization broke something ancient. The heavens, once perfect, were now open to question. For some, it was liberation. For others, blasphemy. But either way, the sky would never again be the same. As dawn approaches, the constellations fade. Stars turn to embers swallowed by the light. The narrator's tone softens. Knowledge of the cosmos was never truly lost. It simply changed hands from priests to scholars, from mystics to mathematicians. And from the heavens came whispers of another kind of power, not celestial, not divine, but human. The kind that burns quietly in the mind and seeks to shape reality itself. In the quiet corners of medieval Europe, curiosity had a pulse. It lived behind closed doors and beneath the ticking of gears. The world was ruled by faith, yet a few daring souls sought to understand motion itself, the secret rhythm behind creation. They were not priests or nobles, but craftsmen and thinkers, men whose hands shaped miracles from brass and wood. To their neighbors they were artisans. To the church they were dangerous. They built machines that prayed, bled, and spoke, but no one dared ask how. The first automata appeared in monasteries. Wooden monks that bowed and crossed themselves with mechanical devotion, driven by hidden springs and weights. Some believed these figures were animated by angels, others by demons. The monks who made them never clarified. They simply smiled, wound the gears, and let the illusion breathe. Faith met physics, and neither could quite let go. One famous story tells of a metallic bird that sang at dawn, built for a royal court. Its voice was not spirit but steam, forced through a delicate pipe. When it moved, even scholars stood in awe. To many, this was proof of divine craftsmanship. To others, it was blasphemy, the imitation of God's creative power. Yet behind the spectacle lay something deeper, the realization that motion could be engineered, not merely blessed. Medieval Europe called such minds mechanici. They worked in secrecy, merging geometry with metal, prayer with precision. Some created clocks so intricate they seemed alive, their faces displaying not just hours but stars and tides. Others built fountains that danced, statues that wept, doors that opened to the sound of psalms. For a moment, magic and engineering shared the same language. But progress was not celebrated. It was feared. The line between invention and heresy was razor thin. When a machine behaved too perfectly, people whispered that it had a soul. When it malfunctioned, they said it was cursed. The church permitted curiosity only when it glorified heaven. Anything else risked excommunication or worse. In a time when even studying the body could be seen as sin, the act of animating matter was unthinkable. Yet curiosity persisted, disguised as devotion. Monks recorded mechanical diagrams in the margins of holy texts, hidden among prayers. A spinning gear beside a crucifix, a coded ratio beneath a psalm. They believed the divine order could be measured, that creation itself obeyed hidden laws. Some of these designs survived, scattered through Europe like seeds. A few centuries later, they would inspire Renaissance geniuses, the clockmakers, the astronomers, the dreamers who built machines of flight and light. But their origins lie here, in candlelit chambers filled with the hum of discovery and fear. Even then, some saw the danger. A device that mimicked prayer could replace faith. A clock that predicted the stars could question providence. The closer humanity came to understanding motion, the more it risked understanding itself. The church could bless invention only so long as it served devotion. The moment it hinted at independence, it became forbidden. So the inventors worked quietly, their genius hidden beneath humility. They signed their work not with names but with symbols, a gear inside a circle, an eye within flame. No one knew who they were, only that their machines seemed to move with purpose, as though something invisible guided them. The gears slow, the candle burns low. A monk winds his creation one last time, then hides it beneath a cloth before dawn. To the outside world, he is a servant of God. In secret, he is a servant of motion. And as the wheel turns in silence, he wonders if machines can move like men, what happens when men begin to act like gods. Fire has always been the language of power. In the medieval world, it was both weapon and warning, a force both sacred and feared. Among the many secrets whispered across continents, none burned brighter or darker than Greek fire. The chronicles describe it as a liquid flame hurled from bronze tubes, clinging to water, devouring ships whole. No rain could quench it, no prayer could stop it. Entire fleets vanished in its roar, their crews swallowed by living light. The recipe was guarded by the Byzantines so fiercely that it became myth, a secret taken to the grave by its keepers. Some claimed it was sulfur mixed with resin. Others said it required divine intervention, a spark stolen from the Sunday. But Greek fire was not alone. Across the Islamic world, engineers and philosophers were experimenting with forces no one in Europe dared name. In Damascus, alchemists wrote of fire that eats metal. In Baghdad, Manuscripts described mirrors large enough to ignite distant objects. The scholar Alhazen studied light itself, proving that vision was not magic but geometry. And yet, his works, centuries later, would be treated as heresy. One legend speaks of a mirror built for an emperor, vast and curved like a moon. It could concentrate sunlight onto distant ships, turning them into pyres. Historians doubt its scale, but the story's persistence hints at something real knowledge that skirted the edge of control. The medieval mind could not separate invention from morality. Power demanded purity. To create a weapon beyond understanding was to invite suspicion, even damnation. And so, many of these discoveries vanished not by accident, but by intent. When a device worked too well, it threatened the balance between divine mystery and human mastery. The easiest way to preserve order was to destroy the evidence. Imagine a craftsman perfecting a new kind of powder, one that explodes not with flame, but with pressure. He tests it once, hears its thunder, and buries the formula forever. Or a scholar translating Arabic manuscripts into Latin, only to strike out every mention of burning light. Such acts were common. Progress retreated underground, surviving in fragments. Even kings participated in secrecy. Armories were locked not just to enemies, but to time itself. Blueprints vanished with their makers. When the wars ended, so did their inventions. It was safer to forget. Still, the question lingers: were these devices destroyed because they failed, or because they succeeded too well? Perhaps the greatest weapon was not fire or steel, but knowledge itself. The ability to harness nature, to command the elements, was a power no ruler could truly trust. So the inventors who dreamed of machines that breathed flame or harnessed light were remembered not as geniuses, but as sorcerers. Their names were erased, their discoveries sealed beneath centuries of ash. A single spark remains the echo of what was once possible. A forgotten manuscript in a monastery, a gear in a museum, a symbol etched in metal whose purpose no one can explain. Each fragment whispers that technology's story did not begin with the modern age. It began in the dark, where invention and heresy were the same word. The flame flickers, then fades to smoke. The camera drifts from firelight into shadow, where unseen figures gather, their robes heavy with authority. They are not inventors, they are inquisitors, the ones tasked not with creating, but with controlling what creation dares to reveal. The smoke clears to reveal parchment. Ash still clings to the edges, blackening words that once shimmered in gold. A book burns slowly, its pages curling like leaves in autumn. The Inquisition has arrived. It began as a whisper, then spread like disease. Heresy was infection, knowledge its carrier. Every book, every diagram, every question became suspect. The Church's agents moved with quiet precision, confiscating manuscripts, interrogating scholars, and extinguishing ideas. To read the wrong page could mean ruin. Yet amid the fires, something strange happened. The more they burned, the more the world remembered. A forbidden idea is not destroyed, it multiplies. In Spain, rumours spread of a codex that refused to die. Said to contain diagrams of strange devices and notes on celestial energy, it passed through generations under false covers, a book of prayers concealing something else. Each owner added to it, hidden between psalms and blessings, until its pages carried layers of voices, monks, alchemists, dreamers. Together, they wrote the unbroken history of forbidden thought. Some pages describe spheres that move without wind, powered by heat alone. Others show patterns of light bouncing through crystal tubes, as if predicting optics centuries before their rediscovery. There are even notes about sound, made visible vibrations shaping matter, forming symbols in dust. To those who believed, this was proof that creation itself could be decoded. To those in power, it was blasphemy. The Inquisition's reach was vast. Whole libraries disappeared overnight. Witnesses spoke of wagons filled with books, hauled to city squares to be set aflame. The smell of parchment mingled with incense, and the crowd watched as centuries of human curiosity turned to smoke. The message was clear: knowledge would obey, or it would burn. But ideas do not obey. A few monks risked their lives to save what they could. Some copied pages by hand, hiding them inside walls. Others memorized entire texts, reciting them in secret until they became living libraries. Through them, Fragments survived the seed of a renaissance that would bloom long after the ashes cooled. They thought they burned a book, but they lit a fuse. From that fire came rebellion. The minds that once hid now began to question openly. What else had been erased? What truth had been rewritten to fit obedience? The codex became symbol, then myth, then movement. Its contents, whatever they were, vanished into legend, but its spirit endured. Knowledge cannot be contained forever. And yet, even today, the line between forbidden and permitted remains thin. Every age has its inquisitors, different robes, same purpose. To guard the story, to limit the questions, to ensure the flame of curiosity never grows too bright. The last surviving page of that codex, scorched and incomplete, rests in a private collection. The ink has faded, but one faint image remains, a wheel turning within a circle, surrounded by words too damaged to read. It looks mechanical, almost alive. Scholars have tried to decode it, calling it metaphor, illusion, coincidence. But perhaps it is something else. A reminder that the quest to understand has always been dangerous, and that progress is a fire we still struggle to control. The ashes settle, the parchment crumbles to dust. Yet in that dust glimmers something eternal, the human urge to know, to question, to build even when forbidden. One page drifts upward on a breath of wind, escaping the fire. It carries the story onward to those secret brotherhoods who would gather in the dark, vowing to keep the hidden knowledge alive. In the fading candlelight of a forgotten chapel, a circle of men kneel. Their faces are hidden beneath hoods, their hands pressed to ancient stone. The air hums with quiet oaths, words spoken not to kings or priests, but to something older. These were the brotherhoods of shadow, the Templars, the Rosicrucians, the unseen custodians of knowledge that refused to die. To the outside world, they were soldiers and mystics, builders and bankers. But within their sealed lodges, they were something else entirely, guardians of an inheritance too dangerous to display. They called themselves keepers of light, even as they moved through darkness. The church called them heretics, yet history whispers that perhaps they were humanity's last librarians. Their symbols still echo across time circles within triangles. Roses crossed with swords, stars with equal arms. Each one carried meaning known only to the initiated. To outsiders, decoration. To insiders, a language. The five-pointed star spoke of balance. The rose marked secrecy blooming from silence. The temple itself, they believed, was not a building but a state of mind. To reach it required geometry of the soul. The Knights Templar began as protectors of pilgrims, sworn to poverty and faith, but their order grew wealthy, powerful, and strange. They built fortresses aligned with constellations and guarded routes others feared to walk. Rumors spread that in their vaults lay treasures beyond gold, fragments of wisdom drawn from the East, alchemical texts, relics older than scripture, perhaps even maps to knowledge buried beneath desert sands. They studied patterns others ignored, the way stars mirrored temples, the way music mirrored mathematics. In every discipline they sought harmony, a secret unity that connected heaven and earth. But unity threatened authority. A church built on obedience could not tolerate those who sought truth outside its walls. And so, the whispers began, that the Templars worshipped idols, that they kissed the devil's image, that their prayers were spoken backward, their rituals obscene. In truth, their greatest sin may have been curiosity. They questioned what could not be questioned, and for that, they became shadows. The Rosicrucians emerged later, draped in similar mystery. Their manifestos promised a universal Reformation, science fused with spirit, art guided by mathematics, medicine infused with divinity. They never claimed power, only purpose, to keep the ancient flame alive until the world was ready. Whether they were real or myth woven from wishful minds hardly matters. The idea was enough to inspire centuries of seekers. Each order, each secret circle, shared a common thread. They preserved fragments of something vast. Some say it was the original science, the geometry of creation itself. Others say it was memory, a remembrance of how knowledge and faith once spoke the same language before fear tore them apart. Picture the moment of initiation, a hand upon a shoulder, a whisper in the dark. Nothing is lost. It only sleeps. The initiate swears to protect what cannot yet be revealed. The oath binds generations. Even as flames rise against their kind, the brotherhood endures. When kings fell and libraries burned, they retreated underground, their scrolls sealed in stone, their truths buried beneath churches and castles. Yet the symbols remained hidden in plain sight, carved into cathedrals, painted into frescoes, disguised as art. Every generation that looked closer found the same pattern staring back. From the knight's scrolls to secret caves, the voice lowers, reverent and quiet. Their enemies hunted them, but their symbols endured. The year was 1307, when silence fell over Europe. At dawn, on the 13th day of October, the King of France struck first. Across the continent, the Knights Templar were seized, accused, and erased. The order that had once guarded the Holy Land was now condemned as traitors and sorcerers. Their leader, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake, his ashes scattered into the Seine. Officially, the Brotherhood was no more. Yet history never ends as neatly as it is written. When their ships vanished, Europe went silent for centuries. Accounts tell of a fleet anchored at La Rochelle that disappeared before the arrests began. Dozens of vessels, loaded not with soldiers, but with something heavier, chests sealed in iron, their contents unknown. Some said gold, others whispered of relics, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or manuscripts from Solomon's temple. Whatever they carried, they never returned. The king's men scoured the ports, but no trace was found. It was as if the Templars had dissolved into mist. Rumours placed them everywhere: Scotland, Portugal, the Pyrenees, even across the ocean where new lands waited uncharted. Some believe their symbols later appeared in the flags of explorers, hidden among stars and crosses. The official records insist they were destroyed. Yet, in remote valleys and mountain strongholds, the Templar cross still appeared chiselled into stone centuries later. Too deliberate, too precise to be coincidence. It was as if their memory had moved underground, carried by those who refused to let the order die. Documents discovered in the Vatican archives centuries later complicate the story. Letters of confession signed under torture, lists of seized items that no longer exist, even papal absolution issued, but never revealed until long after the last night was gone. The church had cleared their names in secret, while their bodies turned to ash in public. Why? Some historians suggest the Templars had stumbled upon truths that threatened both throne and altar. The knowledge of the ancients, rediscovered through contact with scholars of the East, was enough to reshape the world. Geometry, astronomy, chemistry, disciplines the church called heresy, but the Brotherhood called divine order. To silence them was to preserve power, and yet power cannot erase pattern. Their architecture still stands, round chapels echoing the shape of the Holy Sepulchre, tunnels aligned to solstices, coded measurements linking distant sites. It's as though they left behind a map, not of territory, but of understanding. The Templars' legacy survives in the invisible architecture of belief. The compass and square of later secret societies bear their ghostly imprint. Their rituals reappear, altered but familiar, in Masonic halls centuries later. The same oaths, the same signs, the same idea that knowledge must be protected from those who would misuse it. Perhaps their greatest voyage was not across seas, but through time itself. The compass rose spins, pointing west. The narrator's voice softens into the rhythm of waves. Their knowledge didn't die, it sailed. When the Renaissance dawned, it was said that Europe rediscovered the wisdom of the ancients. But what if it wasn't rediscovery at all? What if it was remembering? In the paintings of Botticelli, in the sketches of Leonardo, in the hidden mathematics of Michelangelo's domes, the fingerprints of the old brotherhood reappear. The artists of the Renaissance were not mere painters and sculptors. They were initiates, working with the same proportions once guarded by the Templars and their kin. Geometry became theology once more, disguised as beauty. Leonardo's notebooks read like coded confessions. The Vitruvian man, arms outstretched, caught between circle and square, is not simply art, it is cosmology. The body as the measure of all things, heaven and earth, joined by symmetry. His inventions, flying machines, armoured vehicles, spinning blades, mirror sketches found centuries earlier in Arabic manuscripts and rumoured Templar codices. Was it coincidence or continuity? In Florence, the Medici funded not just artists but philosophers, translators, and seekers. They gathered texts from the East, reviving hermetic and alchemical writings once thought lost. Beneath their patronage, ancient thought was reborn in polite disguise. Mysticism was rebranded as mathematics, alchemy as chemistry, divinity as perspective. The age of reason grew from seeds planted by secrecy. The cathedral builder's geometry found new life in canvas and marble. Proportion, symmetry, and light were no longer instruments of worship but of revelation. Even the symbols returned: the rose, the triangle, the circle, all woven subtly into art that millions would gaze upon without ever seeing the code beneath. Da Vinci's apprentices recorded that their master often spoke of an ancient brotherhood that bound knowledge to silence. He warned them never to share the true purpose of certain drawings, the ones that hinted at perpetual motion or anatomical perfection. His mirrors, his ciphers, his reversed handwriting, all reflections of a mind trained to hide meaning from the unready. The Renaissance wasn't born, it was remembered. The brotherhoods had merely changed form, shedding armor for art, swords for compasses. Their secret language passed quietly into the hands of scholars who claimed enlightenment while guarding the same darkness. By the time Europe called itself modern, the memory of these orders had faded into myth. Yet their architecture, their symbols, their ratios still live within every structure, every equation, every painting that feels inexplicably divine. The human urge to conceal wisdom survived disguised as genius. Even as light returned to the world, some chose to guard the darkness itself. For within that darkness lies mystery, and mystery, unlike truth, never loses its power. In the candle-lit quiet of medieval scriptoria, knowledge was never written plainly. It was hidden. The monks who copied sacred texts by hand believed that truth, like divinity, must be veiled. Each letter carried weight, each number meaning. They said that every holy word hid a number, every number a secret. To modern eyes, scripture seems simple sentences of faith, parables of virtue, but beneath those lines lay invisible architecture. Each word was counted, measured, arranged according to unseen rules. Margins followed celestial ratios. The spacing between phrases mimicked the orbits of planets. Even punctuation, rare and deliberate, could shift the rhythm of revelation. These were not errors or embellishments. They were codes. Some manuscripts bear faint dots or curious red marks, dismissed for centuries as decorative. But under ultraviolet light, they reveal numerical sequences repeating through pages, sequences matching lunar cycles or musical scales. A psalm whose every seventh letter spells another message. A prayer whose syllables form geometric patterns when read aloud. The sacred was mathematics disguised as poetry. The monks called it the divine cipher, an attempt to mirror the order of creation within language itself. If God made the world through the word, then perhaps every word still contained his design. By reading correctly, one could uncover the pattern of the cosmos. One famous example hides in the Book of Kells, where the first page of Genesis spirals into a labyrinth of letters. Within the design, scholars have found proportional alignments matching the ratio of Earth to Moon. Coincidence, perhaps, but the precision defies carelessness. Elsewhere, Hebrew scribes practiced times gematria asterisk, assigning numerical values to letters. Entire prophecies were encoded within the arithmetic of names. A name could reveal fate, a phrase could conceal entire philosophies. Consider the phrase, in principio erat verbum. In the beginning was the word. Medieval numerologists found that when each letter was counted and multiplied by its position, the sum matched the number used to represent the sphere of Mercury, the messenger of the gods. To them, it was no metaphor. The word truly was a messenger language, as motion between worlds. Over time, these hidden systems became dangerous. The church permitted devotion, not decoding. To read beyond the literal was to trespass into forbidden territory. Yet even bishops relied on such numbers to determine feast days and celestial calendars. The paradox was exquisite. To maintain order, they used the very code they forbade others to read. Some scholars believed that the alphabet itself carried remnants of lost civilizations. The shapes of letters resembled constellations, geometric echoes of a time when writing and astronomy were one. The letter A, they said, was not just the beginning, it was the mountain, the axis, the meeting point between heaven and earth. O was the circle of eternity. M was the twin peaks of matter and mind. Language was a map of existence. Hidden within sermons and chants, these patterns endured. To most, they were harmless ornament. To a few, they were messages passed through centuries, a code only the initiated could read. Imagine a monk in a cold monastery, quill hovering above parchment. He writes the word light, but pauses, adding one extra letter, invisible in sound but vital in number. To anyone else, it is error. To him, it is truth encoded, a signal to another who will find it long after he is gone. As time flowed, the ciphers evolved, mathematics became art, letters became geometry, manuscripts turned into mandalas, scriptures into star maps. It is said that those who truly understood could read scripture in any direction, forward, backward, even in spirals, and the meaning would remain, like the universe itself, infinite, self-reflecting, divine. The candle flickers. The ink glows faintly under unseen light. Letters rearrange into symbols, revealing not just words but forbidden names. When the church forbade certain teachings, knowledge did not vanish, it adapted. The seekers who refused to let ideas die found new ways to communicate. They wrote in the one language that could survive scrutiny, the language of holiness. They spoke in scripture so no one would know they were whispering to each other. Through numerology, poetry, and sacred imagery, hidden thinkers built a network of silent correspondence. Within psalms and prayers they disguised equations. Within hymns they encrypted dissent. Their devotion was genuine, yet beneath it ran another purpose: to preserve thought under the cover of faith. The practice of times gematria times became their invisible ink. Every letter a number, every number a key. By calculating the sum of sacred words, they could reference ideas without naming them. A passage about angels might secretly allude to astronomy. A line about the waters of heaven could hide a formula for chemical distillation. The devout recited mysteries they could never guess were scientific treatises in disguise. Mystics across Europe joined this hidden conversation. The Kabbalists in Spain and Provence, the Hermetic philosophers in Florence, the secret mathematicians of Oxford, all shared the same understanding, that truth was safer when clothed in metaphor. The Rosicrucians wrote of a brotherhood of the Rose Cross, promising enlightenment through divine numbers. Alchemists inscribed planetary symbols into scripture, transforming biblical creation into coded chemistry. Even composers joined the dialogue, chant melodies arranged according to numeric scales that mirrored planetary motion. Music itself became cipher, each note an equation of heaven and harmony. This was not rebellion for rebellion's sake. They believed the divine hid within pattern. To study ratios, numbers, and geometry was to study God's blueprint. But if they spoke too plainly, they risked the pyre. So they built sanctuaries in language texts that appeared pious to the eye but glowed with subversion to those who knew how to count. Imagine the tension of that double life, kneeling in church while reciting lines that meant one thing to the priest and another to the mind behind the words. The thrill of concealment was both burden and salvation. Their lives depended on precision. A single misplaced symbol could reveal everything. Some took the art further. They developed substitution ciphers, swapping letters for symbols that resembled angelic script. These alphabets drifted through Europe like ghosts, appearing in grimoires and treatises no one dared claim. Later scholars called them the languages of spirits. Perhaps they were, in a way, the spirits of ideas refusing to die. As centuries passed, their influence rippled outward. Hidden codes in cathedrals, paintings, and musical scores all traced back to that invisible network of minds who chose secrecy over silence. Their symbols crossed borders and generations, teaching through suggestion, never proclamation. Even today, traces remain. The numerical patterns in Bach's compositions, the ratios embedded in the works of Leonardo, the cryptic Latin mottos carved into scientific instruments. Each one a whisper from that ancient dialogue, proof that knowledge once outlawed simply changed its form. The ink fades to black. In its place, a single sigil glows, a circle pierced by light, both eye and star. Some say it marked a prophecy yet to come, a message carried forward by those who dared to count the uncountable. Prophecy is the oldest form of code. It hides truth inside metaphor, shielding knowledge beneath the veil of vision. In the medieval world, prophecy was both revered and feared. To predict the future was to trespass upon divine ground, yet to ignore it was to risk blindness. Were medieval prophecies divine or encrypted warnings for the future? The answer depends on who was writing them. The Sibylline books of Rome, copied and reinterpreted by medieval scribes, were less about gods than governance, political predictions disguised as revelation. The Times, Book of Revelation Times itself, with its beasts and numbers, can be read as allegory for the empire's fall, not the world's end. Every apocalypse hides commentary beneath its fire. The Voynich manuscript, written in an unknown alphabet, remains the greatest enigma of all. Its pages bloom with impossible plants, celestial wheels, and bathing women surrounded by stars. No one can read it, yet its design suggests purpose, circles of time, diagrams of transformation. Was it an herbal of forgotten medicine, an alchemical diary, or a map of the soul itself? Each theory mirrors the mind of the reader, revealing more about humanity than the book. Elsewhere, monks penned their own predictions, visions of floods, comets, and plagues. Some described machines that would walk without horses, or voices that would travel through air. At the time, they were dismissed as madness. Today, they sound eerily like foresight. But perhaps prophecy was not sight at all. Perhaps it was code messages about cyclical patterns in nature and society. The ancients knew that history repeats, that stars return to the same positions, that empires rise and fall like tides. To predict was to calculate recurrence. The prophetic was simply mathematics wrapped in metaphor. Hidden among these texts are patterns of numbers, 7s, 12s, 40s. Each repetition mirrors celestial cycles, the moon's phases, the planet's orbits, the sun's revolutions. Prophecy was astronomy retold as myth, observation sanctified through poetry. To the initiated, it revealed the rhythm of time itself. Some believed certain manuscripts held the true calendar of destiny, a map of ages encoded in constellations. When a star vanished or a comet appeared, scribes updated their calculations, adding to the grand equation of eternity. These were not predictions, they were checkpoints, reminders that the universe moved by design. Through centuries, prophecy became the bridge between science and spirit. Its cryptic language allowed forbidden ideas to survive, hidden behind divine approval. To speak of future machines or distant worlds was heresy. To call them visions from God was genius. And so, prophecy became preservation. The apocalypse was never destruction, it was translation. Knowledge burning away its disguise to reveal something new beneath. As the last manuscript closes, its ink shimmers faintly, words shifting into numbers, numbers into stars. The narrator's voice lowers, and so, the future was written in the past. But one secret remained. How did this forbidden wisdom survive into our world? The Enlightenment was supposed to be the age of reason, the dawn that dispelled the superstitions of the past. Yet within that new light, shadows remained. Behind the marble halls of science and philosophy, a quieter lineage continued, one that stretched back to the alchemists and mystics of the medieval world. They called themselves natural philosophers, but their notebooks glowed with the same symbols that once decorated the walls of secret laboratories. The flame of forbidden knowledge had not gone out. It had simply changed its form. Isaac Newton, the man who gave us gravity, motion, and the clockwork universe, spent more time chasing angels than apples. His private journals, hidden for centuries, reveal an obsession not with mechanics, but with transmutation. He studied ancient prophecies, pored over alchemical manuscripts, and searched for the philosopher's stone. The man who measured the cosmos also believed it could be perfected. In his world, science and faith were not rivals but reflections of the same truth. Matter was divine architecture, equations were prayers written in numbers. When Newton wrote of attraction and force, he was speaking not only of falling bodies, but of cosmic love, an invisible sympathy that bound all things together. The apple was only an echo of something greater, a sign that heaven's laws reached even into human hands. Around him, other minds followed the same current. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, co-creator of calculus, filled his treatises with metaphysics. He saw every particle as a living mirror of creation, a monad, aware in ways too small for perception. To him, the universe was not machinery but mind, a choir of consciousness woven from divine code. In France, Denis Diderot collected human knowledge into encyclopedias, yet whispered privately of unseen energies, connecting thought and matter. In Prague, the astronomer Tycho Brahe built observatories shaped like temples, their designs aligning stars and numbers with geometric devotion. Even the great chemists, separating elements and cataloguing reactions, felt they were decoding the language of God. To the modern eye, these figures appear divided: scientists by day, mystics by candlelight. But to them, there was no contradiction. The Enlightenment did not erase the mystical, it repainted it. Alchemy became chemistry, astrology became astronomy, divination became data. The same desire pulsed beneath both: to know the hidden structure of reality, and through knowing, to transform it. Yet secrecy persisted. Newton wrote in ciphers, burying his more esoteric notes in symbols drawn from Kabbalah and Hermetic lore. He feared misunderstanding, and perhaps prosecution. The church might no longer burn thinkers at the stake, but reputations could still be ruined by curiosity. Knowledge, even in the age of light, required shadows to survive. Those who studied the occult side of science were not charlatans. They were guardians of continuity, bridging ancient patterns to new discoveries. The philosopher's stone became metaphor for transformation: base metal into gold, ignorance into understanding. And though Newton never found the stone, he built the foundation upon which modern physics would rest. Imagine him at his desk, candle burning low, surrounded by flasks and star charts. The air thick with ink, mercury, and thought. He is neither saint nor heretic, but something in between the last alchemist and the first scientist. The Enlightenment, for all its brilliance, was not a severance from the mystical past. It was its rebirth in another form. The flame passed quietly from monastery to observatory, from whispered prayer to printed theorem. And as the candle burns lower, one truth remains constant: light reveals, but it also blinds. Not everyone believed illumination was salvation. Some feared that too much light might burn the world. The same flame that warmed the curious also tempted the ambitious. Knowledge, after all, has never been neutral. In the courts of kings and empires, scholars began to blur the line between understanding and control. What once sought harmony now sought power. In royal chambers, astrologers whispered to monarchs about the alignments of stars and the fates of enemies. The heavens became instruments of manipulation. A well-placed prediction could shift armies, marriages, and empires. The stars no longer spoke of destiny, they were made to serve it. Hidden grimoires circulated among courtiers, their pages filled with correspondences between metals, planets, and emotions. Iron was Mars, copper was Venus, Mercury the messenger. With the right combination, one could bend reality's rhythm. Or so they believed. Some mixtures cured sickness, others, it was said, could sicken kings. The same formula that healed could also curse. In Prague, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II filled his palace with alchemists, artists, and astrologers. The air shimmered with experiments both luminous and dark. Beneath his court, strange fires burned through the night furnaces for distillation, transformation, and perhaps conjuration. Some sought wisdom, others weapons. Even in more rational France, secret orders of the 17th century blended mysticism with mathematics. Members of the Invisible College, precursor to the Royal Society, debated whether nature's laws could be used to engineer minds as easily as machines. The first hints of psychological manipulation emerged there. If the world could be measured, perhaps thought could be directed. Through the 18th and 19th centuries, fragments of ancient Hermeticism resurfaced in darker forms. Occultists, like Eliphas Levi, reinterpreted sacred geometry as tools for willpower. The pentagram, once symbol of balance, became a weapon of command. Magic transformed into psychology before psychology had a name. At the same time, the Age of Empire turned curiosity into conquest. Explorers sought not only new lands but new relics, amulets, manuscripts, forgotten symbols. Entire expeditions were funded to find ancient powers hidden beneath sand and stone. The boundary between science and sorcery blurred until both served ambition. The same equations that described harmony could design destruction. Alchemy's dream of transformation gave birth to chemistry's mastery of matter. Explosives, poisons, fuels, all emerged from the same fire once used to seek perfection. Humanity's reach expanded, but so did its shadow. Secret societies thrived again, echoing their medieval ancestors. The Freemasons spoke of enlightenment, but hid their own rituals of initiation and silence. The Golden Dawn blended mathematics with magic, summoning angels through geometry and recitation. Each claimed to be reviving wisdom older than time. Some sought inner revelation, others sought dominance. It was never just about belief, it was about leverage. Those who understood the pattern could guide it. Governments, churches, and secret orders all pursued the same quiet goal: control the invisible, and you control the world. But knowledge is never satisfied. The more it reveals, the more it demands. Those who reached for light found themselves surrounded by shadow. Every breakthrough carried consequence. Every discovery had its mirror. The narrator's tone softens, heavy with reflection. If the past blurred salvation and control, what of today? Have we truly escaped the forbidden or only renamed it? The world no longer hides its machines, but it still hides its motives. The forbidden has not vanished, it has evolved. Look closely at the modern age and you can still see the architecture of secrecy. The symbols have changed, but the patterns remain. Our cathedrals are laboratories. Our rituals, research. The ancient dream of decoding the universe continues, only now it speaks in formulas of silicon and code. Today's firewalls are yesterday's cathedral structures built to guard sacred information. Where monks once protected manuscripts, engineers protect data. Each line of encryption a prayer to security, each server a reliquary of invisible knowledge. Humanity still builds temples to the unknown. They are simply colder now, humming with electricity instead of incense. Medicine, too, carries echoes of alchemy. The elixir of life became the study of cells. The philosopher's stone became DNA. We still seek transmutation, only now we call it genetics. Scientists modify matter at its smallest scale, rewriting creation itself. The questions have not changed, only the tools. What can we become? What should we become? Architecture, art, and technology still speak the language of mystery. Corporate logos trace sacred geometry. City plans align with cardinal points as cathedrals once did. Even the digital age, with its obsession for connectivity, mirrors the alchemist's old belief in universal correspondence. As above, so below. Our networks are modern webs of magic, invisible yet binding every thought together. But secrecy endures. Governments classify what cannot be controlled. Corporations patent discoveries that could change the world, only to bury them. Information flows freely on the surface, yet beneath it lies a vast ocean of guarded truth. Knowledge remains power, and power still fears exposure. The forbidden persists disguised as progress. Perhaps the modern scientist is no different from the monk, staring into the candle flame of understanding and wondering what waits beyond its light. Each breakthrough opens another veil. Each question answered births three more. For all our certainty, mystery remains our most constant companion. The voice softens further, as though confiding a secret. Humanity never stopped seeking the divine. We simply moved the altar. We kneel not before icons now, but before screens, awaiting revelation through algorithms. We trust equations the way our ancestors trusted prayer. The faith is different, but the longing is the same. And somewhere within that longing, the old flame still burns the same desire that drove the alchemists, the monks, the philosophers, and the dreamers. To know what lies behind the veil, to capture the invisible, to become more than what we are. The narrator pauses. The candle gutters. Every age believes it has tamed mystery. Yet mystery never truly dies, it changes its name, hides behind innovation, waits for a new generation to rediscover what was once forbidden. And so, the story continues. The torch passes from hand to hand, through centuries, through code and stone and silence. Each bearer adds a little light, never realizing they are holding the same fire. The voice lowers, almost a whisper. Every age needs its rebels. And some knowledge refuses to die quietly. The past was supposed to be finished, sealed behind museum glass, catalogued and conquered. Yet, piece by piece, it begins to stir again. Beneath the hum of laboratories and archives, old voices whisper through new machines. Scientists and historians are finding that what was once dismissed as superstition now echoes the frontiers of modern discovery. The forbidden is reawakening. In dusty monasteries, forgotten manuscripts are scanned under ultraviolet light, revealing words erased centuries ago. Ink thought to be random decoration blooms into diagrams, circles, spirals, and equations that describe energy as vibration, movement, resonance. The language feels ancient and new at once. Researchers realized these scribes weren't imagining the cosmos, they were mapping it. Patterns once scorned as mystical resemble the mathematics of quantum fields. A physicist in Geneva studies wave interference and finds an uncanny symmetry with medieval chants, sound frequencies arranged in ratios identical to subatomic harmonics. He laughs at the coincidence but keeps the comparison in his notes. In Japan, an engineer working on magnetic resonance imaging notices that ancient alchemical texts describe a living metal responding to the human pulse. She runs a test on biomagnetic feedback, and the results mirror the old description exactly. What if the future of science was hidden in the Middle Ages all along? The line between science and mysticism begins to blur again, as it always does when the world changes too fast for its own certainty. The more we uncover, the more familiar the unknown feels. Ancient medicine, once dismissed as folk magic, proves to hold compounds that fight modern diseases. Herbal recipes in Arabic codices align with the molecular structures of antivirals. An ancient Greek charm for sleep contains the same rhythm used in cognitive therapy to slow the brain. The forbidden knowledge of yesterday returns, disguised as progress. But progress, like memory, has a cost. The more we rediscover, the more we remember how dangerous it can be to know too much. There are manuscripts that researchers hesitate to translate, texts that speak of energy, that responds to emotion, light that feeds on thought. Legends once told for comfort begin to sound like instructions. In hidden corners of the digital age, modern alchemists experiment with consciousness as a field of energy. Quantum psychologists study how observation shapes matter, echoing medieval monks who once claimed that prayer could alter reality. The equations have changed, but the questions are the same. What is the substance of thought? Where does the boundary between mind and world truly lie? The parallels grow impossible to ignore. A philosopher compares quantum entanglement to the ancient Hermetic phrase, as above, so below. A mathematician deciphers ratios from cathedral blueprints and finds them matching gravitational harmonics. The old builders may have known something we're only beginning to measure. And yet, as these discoveries multiply, unease follows. We realize that forbidden knowledge was never lost. It was simply waiting for us to be reckless enough to find it again. What happens when symbols meant for contemplation become blueprints for machines? When rituals become algorithms? Every age believes it is the first to awaken the sleeping wisdom of the past. Every age forgets that the past never truly sleeps. The hum of discovery grows louder, electric and urgent. Something vast is shifting, as if the old texts were never meant to be read but remembered. The narrator's tone lowers to a whisper. Some knowledge, it seems, is not revived, it returns on its own. And as we look closer, that hum deepens into a warning. There is a rhythm to history, a pattern that repeats like breath. Knowledge rises, blinds, collapses, and is reborn. Now, as the forbidden returns, a question lingers in the silence. What if we are not ready for what we remember? In the medieval world, knowledge could kill. A single word misread, a symbol misplaced, was enough to ignite suspicion and fire. Today, the flames are colder. Information spreads faster than reflection, and curiosity runs ahead of wisdom. We speak of progress, yet our discoveries grow more powerful than our understanding of them. Artificial intelligence learns from patterns older than humanity, building structures of reason we can no longer follow. It predicts our thoughts before we have them. In laboratories, genes are rewritten, mixed with fragments of extinct life, echoing the alchemist's ancient dream of recombining creation. Machines grow closer to mind, and minds depend on machines. The mirror blurs until no one knows which side reflects which. Every age believes it can handle the truth until it finally does. The parallels to the past are eerie. Medieval scholars feared that forbidden books might summon demons. Now, our algorithms summon outcomes beyond prediction. The demon has no face, only data. The heretic is no longer a scholar in a robe, but a coder in the dark, building systems that think faster than conscience. And like the inquisitors of old, we create new guardians. Firewalls, ethics boards, security clearances, modern relics of protection against truths that may overwhelm us. Knowledge remains locked, encrypted, classified. But walls, no matter how advanced, always crumble. What was once hidden behind stone now hides behind code, and code, too, can burn. Perhaps the real danger was never the discovery itself, but the belief that we could control it. The medieval church burned heretics to preserve order. Today, we bury questions beneath bureaucracy. Different century, same fear, that truth might break the illusion of safety. Imagine a world where energy responds to emotion, where consciousness influences probability, where language itself can reshape biology. These ideas no longer belong to mystics, they belong to patents, research grants, and classified projects. Somewhere, the same candle that once burned in alchemists' hands flickers on the screens of physicists and programmers. We stand, as they once did, at the edge of revelation. But revelation is indifferent. It does not care whether we are ready. The narrator's tone slows, reflective. What happens when forbidden knowledge returns to a world that has forgotten reverence? What happens when we treat sacred things as tools? The answer is not catastrophe, it is reflection. For perhaps the real secret of the forbidden is not that it is dangerous, but that it mirrors us. The power has always been human. Knowledge only amplifies what already exists, our fear, our hunger, our hope. A single whisper cuts through the hum. Perhaps the greatest secret was never in the manuscripts, but in us. For thousands of years we have searched outward for truth in stars, in stones, in fire, and formula. Yet the more we uncover, the more the trail circles inward. The forbidden, it seems, was never a boundary set by gods or rulers. It was a veil placed within ourselves. The alchemist's quest for gold, the architect's sacred geometry, the monk's silent chant, all were echoes of the same impulse, to make the invisible visible. Every invention, every revelation, every prayer has been humanity's way of holding a mirror to its own creation. The secret was not hidden from us, it was hidden for us, waiting for the moment we could bear to look. Perhaps that is why knowledge so often arrives through paradox. The more we divide the universe, the more it reveals its unity. The physicist, chasing particles, finds patterns that match the mystic's meditations. The psychologist, mapping the mind, rediscovers ancient symbols of balance and duality. In the laboratory, we glimpse the monastery's shadow. In faith, we find the formula's reflection. The forbidden was never punishment, it was protection. A safeguard against premature understanding, a pause written into evolution. Each generation opens one more door, only to find the next locked for its own good. The purpose was never to hide knowledge forever, but to pace it, to let consciousness grow strong enough to hold the weight of creation. Imagine if humanity had unlocked nuclear energy in the 12th century, or genetic engineering in the 15th. The world would not have survived the revelation. Wisdom, it seems, requires time, centuries of trial, error, and humility. And yet, we are close again. The veil thins. Our sciences speak the language of myth, our technologies mimic magic. We have learned to bend light, to merge flesh and circuit, to send our voices beyond the stars. We have become the very beings our ancestors feared to summon. The narrator's tone softens. The journey through forbidden knowledge was never about finding power, it was about remembering responsibility. The hidden truths of the past were not curses. They were lessons disguised as secrets. Every age of darkness prepared the next dawn. If there is a pattern in history, it is that humanity keeps rediscovering itself. What we call progress may simply be memory returning home. The alchemists, the architects, the monks, the dreamers. They were never separate chapters. They were reflections of one story, told in different languages, the story of consciousness awakening to itself. Perhaps that awakening is the final forbidden knowledge, the realization that there was never any division between seeker and sought. The universe is not a riddle to be solved, but a mirror to be recognized. The wind rises over old stones, pages flutter, the voice grows quiet, almost reverent. Now you know the truth, but what will you do with it? The path is overgrown now. Grass pushes through the cracks of ancient stone, softening the outline of what once stood proud. The ruins of the abbey rise like a memory half remembered, walls broken yet still whispering. The air smells of moss and ash, the scent of things that have endured both worship and fire. The narrator's footsteps echo faintly, carrying through empty corridors where voices once prayed, argued, dreamed. Here, In this silence, humanity feels close. Every stone holds a fingerprint. Every fallen arch bears the weight of centuries that promised illumination and ended in shadow. The abbey is more than ruin, it is reflection. We build our temples, our machines, our sciences, believing we have escaped the dark, but each generation builds its own veil, its own forbidden knowledge. We hide behind new words: progress, data, reason, forgetting that secrecy is as natural to us as breath. The walls still show traces of paint, faded blues and reds, where saints once stood radiant. Their eyes have been rubbed away by time, or perhaps by hands that feared their gaze. Beneath the plaster, archaeologists found other images older, stranger symbols that predate the church itself. Circles within circles, flames without source. Even here, beneath sanctity, the forbidden stirs. The narrator runs a hand along the stone, feeling grooves carved by unknown tools. Once, monks here copied manuscripts by candlelight, their quills scratching like insects across parchment. They wrote prayers, yes, but between the lines, they drew geometry, spirals, ratios, invisible maps of harmony. It was their way of preserving truth while appearing obedient. Centuries later, the same patterns appear in architecture, in physics, in the silent hum of atoms. The monks might smile to see how far their whispers travelled. Every civilization believes itself enlightened, yet history repeats in cycles, each one convinced it stands at the summit, only to watch the horizon rise higher still. The philosophers of Greece, the mystics of the East, the alchemists of Europe, they all reached for a final answer. None found it. Each age begins with confidence and ends in humility. Perhaps that is the pattern, not progress, but transformation. The abbey's ceiling has collapsed, revealing the sky. Through its jagged opening, clouds drift slowly, luminous and indifferent. The narrator looks up and realizes the architecture has reversed. The earth once mirrored heaven, now heaven mirrors ruin. The stars beyond will someday fade, their light swallowed by the same silence that fills this place. And yet, something persists. Maybe the last forbidden knowledge is realizing there is no end to the search. That every discovery, every revelation, is only a doorway to another question. The pursuit itself is eternal, the movement between knowing and wonder, light and shadow. Humanity was never meant to arrive, only to journey. The wind stirs, carrying faint echoes. For a moment, it almost sounds like chanting. The narrator closes their eyes and listens not to words, but to rhythm, the pulse of memory. It is as if the stones themselves are speaking. The sound of the wind transforms into whispers, ancient voices, still echoing. The camera moves slowly now, gliding through centuries of human imagination. A manuscript lies open on a desk, its ink shimmering under lamplight. A cathedral rises beside it, its spire pointing toward constellations that have watched us since the dawn. Above, those same stars burn, distant yet familiar. The images blur together, page, stone, sky, until they become one. The narrator's voice is soft, reverent. Every era believed it was chasing truth, yet truth may have always been chasing us. From alchemists seeking the philosopher's stone to astronomers mapping infinity, humanity has only ever been searching for itself. The sacred texts, the equations, the paintings, all were mirrors held up to the same mystery. Why do we need to understand? Light bends through stained glass, scattering colors across the floor. Each color feels alive, like fragments of thought escaping matter. In one shade, a monk kneels. In another, an inventor sketches flight. In another still, a child looks up at the night sky and counts stars. The impulse that links them is older than any language. What if the real secret wasn't knowledge but curiosity itself? Curiosity is the first fire. It's what led us from cave walls to cathedrals, from prayer to code. It has burned cities and built worlds. It is both wound and cure, danger and deliverance. Without it, the world would remain flat and silent. With it, we risk everything to make it sing. The narrator's voice deepens, carrying a quiet truth. Forbidden knowledge has never been about what we know, but how we use it. When we seek to dominate, it destroys. When we seek to understand, it transforms. The same formula that splits the atom can light a city or erase it. The same question that built the telescope also forged the bomb. Humanity walks forever on that edge between illumination and blindness. The Abbey's whisper returns, layered now with the hum of machinery, the pulse of electricity, the beating of hearts. The symbols of the past reappear in modern form, circuits that resemble constellations, equations that echo scripture. The tools have changed, but the longing remains. We build cathedrals from silicon now, altars of glass and light. We feed data into machines, asking questions once reserved for prophets. What is life? What is mind? What comes after? And the answers, as always, arrive in riddles. The camera pans upward again, books, cathedrals, stars. All glow as one, forming a single image, the human desire to illuminate what lies beyond reach. The forbidden was never darkness, it was invitation. Every secret guarded by time exists not to conceal, but to remind us to look deeper. The narration slows. The candle that once guided the monks flickers one last time. Its flame trembles, then softens. In the reflection of that light, every question humanity has ever asked gathers like constellations across the mind. The candle extinguishes. One final thought remains. Smoke drifts where the candle burned. In its faint glow, particles swirl like galaxies, dust and starlight mingling. The narrator's voice returns, quiet but certain. The story is almost done, yet something still lingers. Somewhere, beneath centuries of stone and silence, a forgotten chamber sleeps, its door sealed, its key long lost. Inside, the air is thick with parchment and memory. Shelves bow under the weight of books no one has touched in generations. A beam of light slips through a crack, illuminating words written in languages we no longer speak. Perhaps this is where it waits, the last fragment of forbidden knowledge. It may not be a revelation or a formula. It may simply be a sentence, one that could change how we see everything. Maybe it explains the symmetry between the atom and the universe. Or maybe it's simpler still, a reminder that all creation began with a question, not an answer. Outside, the world moves on. Cities hum with electricity. Satellites circle above, reflecting sunlight like the halos of saints. Our archives grow taller, our servers louder. But even now, there are places untouched by search engines, truths that live only in silence. The narrator's tone grows distant, like memory fading into mist. We once believed knowledge would free us. Then we learned it binds us too. Every revelation reveals our dependence on the next. Every door opens to another hallway. The more we uncover, the more we realize the infinite is not out there, it is within. The final montage begins. A monk's trembling hand, a compass carving circles in stone, a child watching stars. The camera pulls back further, showing centuries collapse into one another. Wars, discoveries, prayers, inventions, all turning around the same invisible axis. The forbidden past and the infinite future merge. Time folds into itself like parchment closing. The narrator whispers, "Some doors were never meant to be opened, yet here we are, knocking." The echo of that knock travels through space, through centuries, through us. Maybe the door never truly opens. Maybe the point was never to enter, but to listen to hear what answers back. The sound fades into wind again, soft and unending. And in that wind, there is silence. But not the silence of endings, the silence before beginnings. The screen darkens, dust settles. A single spark remains, floating, flickering, refusing to die. The voice returns one last time, barely above a breath. The story ends not with certainty, but silence. A silence that feels like the beginning of another mystery.